Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. This week, we're talking about robots. So, I'm being extremely serious when I just say robots. I don't have any special um, book or anything that kind of inspired this conversation. I was kind of just watching some movies related to robots, and it kind of made me think about what do robots kind of represent in media, and so I kind of got really interested in that. And so here are just some of my findings and what robots can kind of tell us about humanity. So let's hop right into it. So for our first work of art, I'm going to be talking about the movie WALL-E. So WALL-E was released in 2008, and it's a romantic sci-fi film that's animated, and it follows this little square robot who was left on Earth, kind of like just to get help, kind of like compact and get rid of garbage. Um, I forgot to do a spoiler warning. Well, let me rewind. So, if you have not seen the movie WALL-E, it's a really good movie. You can find it on Disney Plus or any other. It's a Disney movie. It's a really good movie. I highly recommend you watch it. If you haven't watched it, feel free to go watch some recap videos or go watch the actual movie and come right back. And yeah, so with that being said, fast forwarding back to the movie, we are watching WALL-E. That's a 2008 romantic sci-fi film that follows a little robot that's on Earth, that was left behind on Earth to kind of compact and get rid of trash. And it is on Earth that um, he runs into contact with another robot that was sent down to Earth to see whether or not Earth would be livable again, because as far as we know, all of the people on the planet have been living on a spaceship for the last years, essentially. Like there's been several generations of humans and of people who are existing in space, and they've all been up there because Earth had become uninhabitable. And the movie just sort of follows the adventures of these two robots who kind of are falling in love with each other, who figure out a way to prove that the Earth is actually habitable again, and that it is possible for human to sustain or to at least hold human life. And so, what I feel like this movie kind of told us about humanity in general, I feel like this movie was kind of letting us know about some fears about the habitability of the planet in the future and how humans will kind of sustain that, and also the likelihood of um, robots kind of overriding um, humans in general. What I found really, really interesting, and I'll probably go deeper in this in our Act 3 for this episode. In this particular movie, the robots did the saving, the robots did the finding, and while there was some human involvement, there wasn't terribly much. And I thought that was really, really interesting. Um, but yeah, I thought this movie was rather interesting, especially considering the time it came out, which is 2008, and so it was also kind of being made prior to that. And how, yeah, it was a really good movie, and I felt like it definitely said something in regards to like people's feelings at the time or concerns when it came to existing. And I'm actually gonna also kind of talk about another robot movie in our next segment. Alrighty, so our next piece of art is the movie The Wild Robot. Now, this movie is based on the book that was by the same name. So the book is called The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, I believe. And the book was released in 2016, and the movie came out in 2024. So it's a relatively recent movie. If you've read the book, you've pretty much seen the movie. And I've been told like somewhat vice versa as well. So if you're interested in watching a movie with a fresh set of eyes, because I do recognize this movie came out really, really recently, pause here, go check out a recap, go check out the movie, and then come back and you can finish this episode. Or if you don't mind spoilers, feel free to stick around. I have no intentions of like spoiling like every single scene by scene, because I do kind of want you all to have be able to watch the movie, and it may just kind of inspire you to look at the movie or pay attention to different things in the movie after listening to this episode. I try to do that with all the art I talk about. I don't want to spoil anything too much, because sometimes like listening for the first time or watching for the first time or experiencing something for the first time is really cool and really magical, and it means a lot to a lot of people. So I try to be cognizant of that and still allow for there to be things discovered when you first watch something, listen to something, or see something. All right, moving on. So, The Wild Robot, the movie follows this robot that was crashed off of a ship, and in the robot woke up on this island of this wilderness island, essentially, that had a whole bunch of like animals and stuff. And we see the robot kind of trying to get to know the people on, not people, I say people, but I mean animals. So it's only animals on this island. So it's we see the robot trying to get to know the animals on this island, and trying to almost get in community with them, and then having to essentially learn how to redo itself, or it essentially had to reprogram itself in order to be what I would say like a better community member in this island, on this island. And I thought that was a really interesting message for this particular movie, because especially if you consider a lot of the themes and a lot of things happening, especially around the time when this was released, I feel like it speaks to those fears of like a lack of community, or a lack of um, being like feeling like you can fit in with those around you, especially because like it's a robot and it's a bunch of animals, and so like the robot kind of had to get acclimated, and then had to kind of also teach and show the animals like, hey, it is possible for us to work together, stuff like that, which I thought was really cool. Um, and so yeah, I thought that was really cool in the way that like both this movie and the last, they kind of spoke to the time and to some of the fears of that time. And I think that's kind of just the role that robots tend to play. And I want to go over a bit of a brief history of that, like the role that robots have in art in our next segment. Fun fact: robots, the very first time robots were ever seen in film was 1918. And um, it was Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini's The Automaton, and what's the show called? What's the show called? Um, the Master Mystery. And so that is was the very first time we ever seen a robot. So that's like that was around 1918. But the very first time the word robot was used for such a creature was actually in 1920 in a play, a Czech play, in 1920 and it was called Rossum's Universal Robots. But interestingly enough, while I was also researching this, I found out that the word robot actually first kind of like came from a word that essentially meant slave, or indentured servant, and that word was dates all the way back to like 1839, I believe, which I found to be really interesting, especially when you consider the roles that robots often do serve in film, in movies, in all the like entertainment that we get for the most part. That like they are almost they are always sort of serving the purpose of someone else, unless it is specifically everyone in that film or in that universe is a robot. So I thought that was really interesting, in that like the way the word robot in meaning like originally meaning essentially like servant, being transitioned to this mechanical thing, mechanical and non-emotional having sort of thing, to came to also essentially be used as a servant, but it's been almost dehumanified, dehuman, unhumanized, dehumanized. That's the word. I'm smart. Dehumanized And like the use of it became much more prevalent in a lot of films and stuff to kind of represent like the tech at the time, whatever like movie or show came out or art came out that used it, and kind of like even like cultural concerns around that time as well. So like we were talking about with Wally, I feel like around 2008 there was a very big scare around climate change and climate control and things of that nature. And like honestly, like those fears aren't new or unheard of. Like it's been happening for a while, but like I feel like things were definitely kind of getting a bit louder in that department around 2008, and that's when that movie came out. And so we see in Wally kind of talking about like them trying to ensure or save the ability for Earth to remain habitable for or to become habitable again for people, and trying to find a way to save um, Earth in a way um, from tech that was essentially trying to take over um, and keep humans in space. And then we see in the Wild Robot, we see another robot essentially protecting a like this wilderness place that they grew that they were abandoned in essentially, and they reprogrammed themselves and found community in the animals on this planet, and they were doing their best to save those animals. Um, which I feel like while both of these movies do sort of reflect um like saving, protecting like wildlife or climate, they look at it differently. So like with the Wild Robot, it kind of looked at it as um protecting the community that they come to know and have come to care about despite being a robot, which is really important. And then the same can be said for in Wally, in that like it is they have come to care. Actually, so Wally was more of a romance, which I found interesting. So it was more so Wally cared about Eve, and in his care for Eve, he kind of also cared about the the future of the planet essentially, because that was something that Eve cared about, which was fascinating to say the least. Um, and it's really really interesting to see how both human, both not humans, but both robots, while they're not human, and they were both essentially created to be servants to the humans on which they were, who they were either supposed to serve or on the planet they were supposed to serve, which is Wally's case, or the people whoever bought them, which was the case of Roz, which is the name of the robot in the Wild Robot. And so um, they were essentially created with a specific task at hand in serving those they were told to serve, but they eventually came to reprogram themselves in a way to serve their own interests, which was really really fascinating. Something also really cool about both of these and about the role that robots often do play in art is that robots have kind of taken this role. So robots have always sort of taken the role of whatever the climate and the mood is of that time period that it was released in. And so like you can see the concerns around specific like you watch movies from certain time periods that use robots, and you can kind of get an idea of what some of those fears might be. So um yeah, I challenge you, or if you do or have already watched a few like movies that have had robots in it, drop those in the comments, and tell me what themes you kind of feel like those robots represented for that time period. So like you want to keep in mind the climate around which this movie was created, and then kind of apply that and see how it might reflect in the film. Like who do those robots represent? Because that's something else I think is really important, is that like we understand how to engage the media that we're consuming. Because like yes, art is art, but there's so much meaning in art, and there's so much of the real life that is existing outside of it also in that art. Like art nowhere in any type of in any type of capacity does art exist in the vacuum? And so it's actually really, really important that we recognize that and that we move forward in ensuring that we make that we recognize those things in the art that we are consuming. So that's a bit of a challenge or a bit of a request, I suppose, for you all when like engaging in media. And so it's like you'll notice these things in like other monsters and whatnot as well, which I actually am considering doing something with that as well. Like also exploring other monsters or creatures or things like that in film and what they tend to represent and how they represent different things throughout different times and whatnot like that. I think that's actually really, really cool. But also, that's actually, I'd say, most of what I have for regarding this specific topic. Um, I think this might be a relatively short episode considering all the other episodes for this past season. But I just think it's really cool to be able to explore what robots can teach us about humanity. So, like Wally taught us to not give up, to care about the things that those close to us care about. Um, Especially if it's a means to like improving the world and working towards like showing that like a better future is possible. And the same can be said for Roz in The Wild Robot, in which that like Roz told us that it is important for us to engage and be in community with those around us, and that like it will take learning. Like it's not going to be any like easy process to engage and be in community with those around us, um, especially if we want to see a better future or we want to see, like, say, our people be kind to one another. It's important that we engage them and like be of service as well. If we, especially if we want to be in community. So, like, to be a community member, you have to be a part of the community and not just someone that only like ever sticks to the outside, which is surprise, surprise, a common theme. And I feel like a lot of the art I consume, and that might just be how I pick things, but it's also just something that I strongly personally believe in. So, yeah. So maybe caring about others, caring about the world, and even robots too can be an art, and art like everything else. Last and certainly not least is our this week's awe moment. So for those who are new to this segment or those who are new to this podcast, a reminder: our awe moment is art that made me think for the week. Um, and so for this week's awe moment, I actually wanted to talk about there's not that I'm trying to do any type of promo for Disney, but there's the Goofy movie, like the Goofy movie. There's a whole documentary about to come out about the Goofy movie because it's one of like the anniversary years, I believe. And something really really cool around it is that like they've been releasing like these cool promo videos. And on YouTube, I recently found they did one of like the Powerline concert, and it's like it's 3D. It's on YouTube and it's like 3D. I'm gonna link it in the description below. And what's really cool about it is that like when you click on it, you can look all around you. Like you can move like your cursor or whatever. If especially if you're watching on a TV, you can use a remote to look, and you can look at everything around you. And I find it really fascinating, especially like just thinking about how like far tech has come today. And I don't know, I thought this was really cool and somewhat relevant to what we were just talking about when it comes to robots, because it also like something else around robots is that like it tends to try to focus on like the technical advances of the society as well around that time. And so I thought it was really really fascinating that we've gotten to this point where like you can like render almost the environment inside of the movie, and then you can have it can look like you're in the movie, and you can like look around and see everything and see like above and below and all types of stuff. And so I watched the video a lot because it's something new. I didn't notice every other time, and so it's really really cool, and I really really enjoy it. And so if you have any other cool art that you might like or that you have watched recently, drop them in the comments below. And questions for this week aren't going to be too many. First question: let me know of some art that you have been enjoying lately? Question two, do you have any favorite robot related movies? And that's all. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our YouTube channel, Art Like Studios. Is all of our social media, and um, if you'd like to follow my personal accounts, it's The Lovely Infinite, but the word lovely doesn't have any of the vowels in it. It does have the Y, so it's TheLVly Infinite. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.